Good evening. Good evening. Hello, hello. I hope that everyone is having a wonderful, wonderful Sunday afternoon, early evening. So, again, good evening. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, this is the place to be. This is the place and space to be in if you are a change maker, right? A change maker can be parents, it can be educators, instructional coaches, people at central admin. Special shout out to the math educators, the math team, but any and all educators for sure. And want to be super clear that we are all educators in some way, some fashion. We're all teaching people something, right? So we want to make sure we're being very intentional about it. One of the ways that we are intentional about what it is that we're teaching is the questioning. So, this evening, our focus is how the right question changes the whole lesson. Y'all, how it just shifts everything. Oh, I got excited. I know I get excited. So, I'm Anika from Holistic Fluency. And again, we're talking about something that it might seem small, but it shifts everything, y'all. The questions that we ask because we understand, and you probably have some of your own examples that you're thinking of right in your head right now, that we know that the right question, it doesn't just get an answer, right? It unlocks something. It unlocks thinking, processing, and gives us insight, especially as they're adults, even if it's within conversation between two adults, right? It gives us insight to their processing, their thinking, and it reminds me of a story. Okay, a story that I have thinking about my son had we not asked the right questions. So, not math related, but y'all come on this little journey with me. So, about 3 years ago, just a regular evening, getting ready for bed. My then kindergartner was kind of tugging at his ear. So one, observations, right? So some of the curiosity, the observation, just kind of looking like, So the first reaction is something wrong? And that's a yes no, right? That's a yes no question. So it's like the second thought was, is everything okay? Or is something going on with your ear? Okay, so what is your ear bothering you? What's going on? Describe to me what's going on. You keep pulling. So that's a whole different kind of question, different kind of setup. So to that point, right, it was no longer a yes, no, describe to me what's going on because I notice you keep pulling it. So we made it more of an open ended, tell me what's going on. So fast forward, the short version is my son had placed the rock in his ear, ended up having to get surgery to get the rock out. Now, have we not asked the right questions, right? Like, how do you know? Okay, so tell me how you know there's a rock in your ear. Where did the rock come from, right? Explain. So, all of these types of questions, right? It wasn't just a what, a where, and when. We needed more details. So, the type of questions we were asking him were much more layered, backed up again. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining. Okay. So, y'all, I understand that right now, most of the country, we're talking about questions. I gave y'all, even in a personal space, right? A personal setting, how we want to make sure we're choosing and carefully thinking about good questions to ask. I know that classroom life, though, most of the country is in review mode as campuses everywhere are gearing up for state assessments. So most elementary students in Texas, they're done. The vast majority do y'all know that in public K-12 education, there's about 50 million students, right? The vast majority of that 50 million in K-12, they're on the brink of their tests, whether it's just tests to see how they're progressing, if they aren't officially at that third grade or above yet. Everybody's getting ready to do something right now, just in 3, 2, 1, right? As early as tomorrow. Again, some have already started last week. Y'all, even though you're in the midst of review, I want you to reflect on a math question that you've asked. Maybe last week, you're considering asking this week, and be honest. Was it a recall question? Did it require any reasoning? Did it require any reflection? And again, I'll take a moment because I understand that not everyone is connected to education that may be watching, but I want you also to reflect, to consider the last question that you asked. right? Was it recall? Was it reasoning? Or was it reflection? Okay. And I told you that even in the space where it's not just math educators, we want to make sure that also as parents, we're asking certain types of questions. Yeah. Because again, I told y'all how they went, how who knows how long it would have taken for us to realize something was in my son's ear, let alone what happened to get the thing in his ear, had we not posed the right question. So we understand. Again, challenging the question. So before you ask a question, whether it's just in a conversation, if you're not an educator, slash, if you are in education, how often do you stop and consider? How often do you reflect on your questions before asking them? Like you might reflect thinking about, should I make some adjustments? Should I make some revisions? How often do you do that? Do you revise your questions all the time? Sometimes. Rarely? Or are you saying, Anika, what is a revision? Girl, what are you talking about? Y'all, let me know in the chat. Let me know in the chat. How often do you revise your questions, whether that's questions in the math class, maybe you as a parent, just in your general interactions as a person? How often do you revise your questions? Always. I'm always reflecting and I'm going to make some revisions. Maybe your answer is sometimes, maybe rarely, slash, maybe you said, Madam, what is a revision? I want you all to think about that. I want you to really reflect on that as we continue this conversation this evening. Okay, because we're really making sure that we're intentional about the right question and making sure that we're asking the question in such a way that, again, we're promoting that critical thinking, we're promoting that reflection. And honestly, like this was always, I know more of a sales thing when I worked in sales. If we ask the right question, you definitely are getting the other person to talk more. The other person should be talking more than you when you ask a question. That was always a thing. Okay, someone says sometimes. Okay, thank you for checking in. Thank you. All right, y'all. So we're going to talk about the power of the upgraded question, we'll say. And we have something special for y'all at the end. Speaking of question upgrades. Okay, so just an example. Y'all know we love to give examples for questions we might hear often. Maybe we work through them ourselves in class. But here's one. Instead of what's the answer to 6 divided by 2? The question upgrade, the upgraded question will be, can you create a word problem? Can you create, for the little people, we say story problem, where someone has to divide 6 by 2? First, the first version, what's the answer to 6 divided by 2? Yeah, that first version only focuses on the product, like the end product. What did you get? Right? The second version, can you create the word problem? Y'all, that activates connection, creativity, and language. All these things have to come into play. That's when you also, just the educator side, the parent side, you understand and learn more about even your young person's interests because they're going to choose things that are important to them. They're going to choose things that they're interested in. So it gives them a chance to practice just their general vocabulary, their math vocabulary, make some connections, and use their imagination to create. So love word problems and story problems. I know it gets complicated when we see them on the state assessments and some assignments, but especially the more that they can create their own, the more comfortable everyone becomes with them. The more comfortable everyone becomes. Okay, someone said, I'm going to say sometimes I'm building the habit, asking better. Okay, since being engaged on this platform. Oh, that's cool. That's a very cool reflection. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. That's definitely the goal, that we're more reflective all the time, right? We always have room for growth, that we're very reflective and intentional about our questions, our interactions, which includes our questions and our responses, right? Okay, let's see. So we have a couple things pulled up for you. So I understand. Again, I know for a lot of us, listen, Anika, we're in the midst of closing out paperwork. It's test season. It's a lot going on. I really don't have the capacity to think of a question, some sample questions for you right now. Do you have any you can use as examples Fret not, I sure do. Okay. Again, I know that you are in high review mode. You might have a review pack this week. So let's talk about and let's focus on how we might see some of the questions and we're upgrading them. We're focusing on our question upgrades. So again, the original question, it might be, and in some states, right, we have sections of the test that are calculator based, and then other sections where students cannot use calculators. So one of them might be, what is 10 more than 37? That would obviously be a non calculator question. Now, this could also be a non calculator question, the upgraded version, but it definitely requires a bit more thinking and application of what we understand. So instead of just what is 10 more than 37, upgrade. You have 37 blocks and someone gives you 10 more. How many do you have now? And how could you show how much you have with a drawing or show it with blocks? Yeah, so why it works again is shifting from computation to modeling the process, and that allows students to visualize their thinking, which is key, especially in those early number sense skills. Those early number sense skills, being able to visualize, understand what the models mean, that's key. That's essential. It comes back again. A lot of the modeling comes back again in middle school, actually, but they do it more algebraically. It combines a few things together. You all, with this in mind, we've talked before on here about people's learning styles, right? There's three main types. We have visual learners, people that they learn and remember really well. They demonstrate their knowledge really well based on videos, pictures, graphs, tables, right? Those are our visual learners. So that's how they learn best, and that's how they actually study best as well. We also have auditory learners. So people who learn and understand and show their learning very well by listening, right? Whatever you said, they can say, they can listen to your speech, they can listen to even the sound bite maybe of a video, and they remember it very well, and they can give back that information. Slash, we have people sometimes say tactile, some people say kinesthetic, but that just means these are the people that have to do it. Once they do it, right, their hands on with it, then they're locked in. They really and truly understand. So again, if we're talking about the modeling, that last question, y'all, that touched two. They did it, right, because they had to build it, as well as they get to see their final product. So they get to see the model. And the reality is, a lot of our alpha generation, and I think we talked about this, that we have the beta babies were born this year, 2025. But Gen Z, our alpha generation, they're proving to be a mashup of visual and tactile. So visual learners, and they have to be in hands-on learning. It's best for them. Slash, in math life, that's what the first step in the math learning phases are. The first step is we call it concrete. Right? I don't want to get too technical this evening, but it's concrete. It means you're touching, you're doing it with your hands, you're creating models, you're building. Okay. So that's the first step of the phase anyway. So these young people are right in line with these are the levels for how I can best learn and understand math. So maybe more of an upper elementary. So think third grade to 5th grade example question. So, that's when they're getting into perimeter of rectangles and things, right? If the rectangle has the sides of 6 and 3, what's the perimeter? We've talked about this before, bringing in that real world connection, just anchoring it in the real world. A fence builder needs to outline a garden with sides of 6 feet and 3 feet. How much fencing will they need, and how could you prove it without using the formula? What? So without using the formula, because usually in 3rd grade, they don't know a formula yet. So they're very in tune to actually drawing it out. The formula gets more introduced about 4th, 5th grade. So prior to that, they're literally going to draw and show you everything for sure. Okay. So one of the reasons why that works well, besides the real world anchor, y'all, it opens space for their conceptual understanding and also the representation, y'all. That's phase 2 of the math learning process. If phase 1 is concrete, you're hands-on, you're building. So about upper elementary, we're getting more and more into the representation phase where you don't have to touch it every time. We can draw a picture that represents something that you've touched before, and you can still make that same connection to it. So that's more the conceptual understanding, representation, and it's not memorizing a formula. That's why it works, because it's a deep understanding. Okay. So these right questions, making sure we shift. Again, if we have middle school life, it's equations, 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 right? Your middle school math life. So think if you saw a problem that said negative 3x plus 5 equals 20, right? People starting to solve. All right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to move this over there. Pause. Before that, what if we showed students that problem and we said, hey, this equation represents a temperature drop? Ooh, I just gave them some context, even though this is an abstract question, right? They just got some context really quickly. So if it supports a temperature drop, when else might this situation happen in real life? How could you explain your steps to someone else? Y'all, we know in middle school life, they're very social. So think about adding that aspect to say, hey, how would you explain this to someone else? Because that's what they want to do anyway. They want to talk. Give them something productive and beneficial and constructive to talk about. Yeah, while they're in math class. Yeah, this works because again, it gives that abstract question, right? This is just an equation I was supposed to learn. It gives it context. It supports their verbal reasoning, them being able to explain. We can't stress enough how much it's an essential skill, how important it is for the young people to be able to explain, not even just if it's correct, right? But just either way, just explain your reasoning. What was your process? Because we talked about that maybe about a month ago now, that well, they can explain their reasoning that helps us know how to respond, right? And how to help, how to best support versus assuming, okay, you got all of this wrong. You have no idea what's going on. And it might not be that serious. It might be just this one area that there was just a misconception or even a miscalculation. So a lot of times, and I had a parent text me, or a parent that was on that session about, okay, be careful about your response after you ask a question, right? Do you just go straight into explain mode? Do you give them some space to explain how they got there? So she said she tried the strategies and she said their math homework sessions are going so much better. And usually, while her son is explaining his reasoning, that he corrects his own mistake. So she doesn't even have to put on, right? She doesn't have to even get on her platform or her soapbox to say, okay, so for this fraction, while he's explaining, he normally finds his own mistake. So imagine the power in that reflection, right? And that metacognition, just so that he's more careful when he gets to that step next time as well. So I thought that was really cool. I told her I appreciated her sharing that with me to let me know she was trying it and how it was going, right? So besides supporting their verbal reasoning and us having a better entry point, knowing where to start supporting them, y'all, it helps to preview their constructed responses. Because middle school, that's when they're writing more and more about whether or not this answer makes sense. Justify this. Which one is correct? How do you know? That's when the layers of the answers that they have to write in or type in become a little more complex, where it might be 2 and 3 parts instead of just that one part. Is this correct? What's one of the ways we can prove it? We have a couple ways we can prove and explain and justify. Okay. So high school, super similar, right? That's when we're doing all kind of quadratic equations. Y equals x squared minus 4x plus 3. What's the vertex? What? Okay, what if, super similarly, we set it up, form differently? If we say, hey, this equation represents the path of a basketball. A lot of people locked in now, right? This equation represents the path of a basketball. So what does the vertex tell you about the shot? Y'all, they still have to find the vertex, but now they have more context about, well, what does this mean about the shot, right? And we can also ask, how would you find it using more than one method? So at this point, maybe they have their graphing calculator, maybe they understand the how to solve the equation. But this taps into their visualization. As soon as I said the path of a basketball, I bet you imagined it yourselves. Like, oh, someone shoots the arc, then it comes back down, right? There's multiple strategies to approach. They have to apply one or more of the strategies. All of this just deepens mastery, even when they're prepping for test items. So again, we can take even some of the answer choices away, right? Give them context, and we can take some of the answer choices away, and that'll be a richer task, a richer conversation in class, and a richer conceptual understanding, right? Because we don't have to be, okay, everybody worked it out. What did you get? We can take some of the answer choices away and have a very deep conversation about it. So, one thing I told you I had something for y'all towards the end. So, we have a few questions for y'all for a little document we put together called a question upgrade pack. So this question upgrade pack, y'all, it has common questions, but the rigor is low. It's really not where it needs to be. If you were on our webinar last week, slash, you heard us talk about one of the goals of the webinar, we actually looked at the percentages of how the different questions are asked, the distribution of questions according to Bloom's taxonomy, right? The lower level order thinking questions all the way up to the higher order thinking. And the data show that a lot of the questions in the classroom, we said the percentage, is low for the classroom. It's much lower than what you would think, that you're like, that high of a percentage for the classroom questions are all in the lower category. And it's way too high, especially compared to these state assessments we're prepping them for, the with the end of grade exams, all these things that the questioning has to change. There's lots of resources, there's lots of support for different things, but it's the questioning, you all. So we're focusing on the inquiry-based version, not the lower rigor question. We're focusing on why it works, and then a try this, right? A different kind of prompt, the shift and adjustment to make for class. So if you are interested in that, if you're interested in receiving the question upgrade pack, make sure that you comment pack in the chat and you'll receive that, right? I will send it to you here. If you've already subscribed to our email list, don't worry, you're going to get it soon anyway. No worries. You all, one thing we want to be super clear about, though, before we wrap up this evening, is a better question doesn't take more time. That's not it. It does take more intention, though. That's why we started off. I asked you, I said, okay, how often do you reflect on a question before you ask? And once you reflect on it, how often do you revise? That's where we started. Because the better question doesn't take more time, it just takes more intention. And then the result can be so rich. Remember, we said if we ask the correct question, everything we need answered can be answered with that one question if we pose it correctly. So I don't want you to think that you're adding to your plate. You're just upgrading what's already there. That's why I have this question upgrade pack ready for you. If you comment pack in the chat, slash, make sure you join our email list, okay? If you're already on the email list, you're already going to get it. So there's a number of questions we've been receiving in our DMs, some of which we've talked about here. So is the AI-powered assessment toolkit only for upper grades? So using AI in math classes, they're only for upper grades? How does this help students who struggle with word problems? I mean, does this really connect to test prep? You all, our next live stream, we're addressing a lot of our frequently asked questions. A lot of things come up in conversation with people, sometimes walking from the bus stop, our DMs, a lot of places, but we're going to make sure that we address them on the next live. So even in the meantime, if there's some questions that you have, you work in an education setting and you keep hearing people talk about this certain thing, send me the question. We'll talk about it. Okay. But again, thank y'all so much for tuning in this evening. Listen, you know that we feel that math is more than numbers. It is its own language, but it's a language of logic, identity, and confidence. So let's make sure that the questions that we're asking reflect all of that. All right, y'all. Thank y'all. Have a good evening. See you next Sunday. Bye bye.